What's up, Audioholics? It is Thursday night. We've got 4 people here on a live stream. 4 people because it's so incredibly important, the topic we're going to discuss. It's about acoustically transparent screens. And we have Jason Dustal here. And we have, how's it going, Jason? We have Don Dunn, Gone Getter Dunn. And of course, we've got Matthew Pose.
Pose, Matthew.
Poser. Poser.
So yeah, guys, I wanted to talk about this because it's affecting me right now because I'm setting up the Audioholics home theater, the theater room, as you can see here. We've got a Screen Innovations Unity AT screen we set up, and we have the center channel behind the screen using the Storm audio processor, got a Valencia seating. So we're in the process of still kind of fine-tuning everything and dialing things in really great at this point. But you know, we did run into some snags with the screen material and some acoustical stuff that we found with the center channel. So we were mitigating this somewhat by moving the screen off the wall and putting some acoustic treatments behind it. And that's when I said, Matt, why don't you research this a little more? And of course, Matt writes up a freaking book report like he works for NASA. And
thank God for Pose. Thank God.
Yeah. So we got Matt's dissertation and we got Jason's field experience, because Jason's is an ISF trainer. He's not just a certified ISF person, but he actually trains people on ISF certification. Jason, why don't you give us like a quick rundown of what ISF is all about for anybody here watching that doesn't know that?
Thank you. So back in the 90s or so, there was a magazine called A Perfect Vision, and some of you guys might remember that from back in those days. And they were just, reviewing TVs and doing that type of work. And the general consensus was, how can we fairly judge these TVs if they all look different? And it got a couple of guys thinking, and they were tinkerers anyway, and they started finding things like service menus and white balance adjustments, and read a couple of white papers on broadcast standards and cinema standards, and kind of just put everything together. And they said, okay, there's this very specific way that our eyes see color and see light. We understand that. That's the easy part. Now, how do we maximize the video quality of a video system? Now, what does that mean? So there's kind of 4 pillars we sort of live and breathe by when we talk about video quality. So the whole point of it is let's get all these TVs on the same playing field. Let's calibrate them all. We're going to match them to broadcast standards. We're going to match exactly what the artist intended us to see. And that was really the beginning of the ISF. And, this was mid-90s, 1994 or so. And Joel Silver, our founder, we're still teaching classes, well, all over the world again soon, but we normally are all over the place teaching classes, teaching integrators, TV reviewers, and guys like Eugene.
So I'm going to show my age here, and Don will back me up on this. But I had the old Sony rear projection TVs, and I had to go into the service menus to fix the red push problem. Do you remember that? Yeah.
Did you have the XBR with the piece of plastic on the front?
Yep.
Like the in front of the lenticular screen. God, that's going back, man.
Yeah.
I haven't seen lenticular screen in like 20 years.
But
I do remember that.
I remember people going online and giving all these user menu kind of calibration tweaks into these TVs. So ISF just kind of takes that to the next level and sets a standard for how things should look, basically. Right.
Oh, ISF changed everything. I mean, they were kind of like the THX of video. I mean, they truly.
One thing that we kind of live and breathe by is we didn't create the standard. We just know what it is. So you guys know, I mean, if you read any standards paper on, say, broadcast TV, and they tell you what the white point is, they tell you what color gamut it is, they tell you what the primary and secondary colors are. So you could just take all that information, manipulate your TV at home to do those things and hit those color points, and boom, now you've got a calibrated picture.
Right.
So, hey, Jay, I get a couple people hit me up privately saying that they're hearing that background noise. Is that you, that light?
Is it kind of a squeal sort of sound?
Yeah, people are hearing it.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little dark, but that's okay.
You are a little dark.
I was saying earlier, I've been shooting a bunch of training videos at the office, so this is like my backup rig. But if I brighten my screen, that'll help a little bit. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that looks fine.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, so I want to get down into what Matt has with this PowerPoint because we want to talk about the different kind of screen material that you can use for acoustically transparent screens, the pros and cons, and basically how to overcome some of the acoustical issues that we were finding in my room. I think this is going to be really beneficial for anyone that's considering. First of all, before we get into that, why would you want to put your center channel behind an acoustically transparent screen as opposed to putting it below the screen? That maybe Matt, if you want to jump in and just say, what are the advantages of putting a speaker behind the screen?
It's actually in the presentation too, but I can mention it. So basically the idea of it is that I think everybody knows from their stereo days that you want your left and your right speaker to be placed such that the tweeter is roughly at the ear height, right? And then you want an image when it pans across the front there to all pan consistently at the same height. If the center channel is below the screen, then you get a U-shaped image. And they actually have, I didn't include it, I should have, but there is some research that was done where they basically had people sit in a chair kind of like this, and they had speakers in front of them in different positions, and they gave them a laser pointer, and they had them point at the wall where the speakers were as to where they were hearing we'll call it the phantom source coming from, or potentially the real source coming from. And what they found was that when you have a center channel down low like that, people point at it, meaning that you actually do hear it coming not from the screen, from below the screen. So ideally, in a perfect world, you would have all three speakers be identical speakers placed at exactly the same height. And the only way to do that with a projector is to have a screen with holes in it.
Right. Matt, by the way, your audio is going in and out in loudness. I don't know why it's doing that, but.
Oh, I'm not really sure why it's doing that either. And wait, Gene, I forgot something. So last time when I wore it could be this headset that I'm wearing in the way that we're using it this time, but Joe from Joe and Tell is the one who something happened.
It went up loud. It went up 10 dB for a second.
Hold on, I think I might.
We're only Audioholics, we're never going to get the sound right.
Gene, can you unshare my screen for a second?
How can anybody give us any credibility if we can't get our sound right?
Hey, look, I'm a video guy. My camera looks like garbage.
Oh, yeah, you always defer to that. You were not just a video guy. You were as much audiophile as anybody I know.
That's where it started for me, man. Just listening to records as a wee little lad.
Yeah, Jason and I were talking before because he lives in St. Pete, right next to Mazzara's Italian deli, and there's Banana Records right across from that.
Is that what we were talking about with that guy last week? I got to try that place.
You have to go. It's the bomb. They have probably the best Philly I've found. Maybe
really.
Oh yeah.
Really? Oh, yeah. They put the whiz on it,
and the best coffee too, man. Their cappuccinos are awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
You guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
All right. Does it sound normal now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to share screen here. Let's get this up here. There we go.
All right. So we're doing acoustically transparent screens. We just talked about that. Sight versus sound. So the reason why I titled it this way, and that's why we've got Jason and myself here to talk about this, is that at the end of the day, there are compromises with these screens. And so you have to make a decision. What's more important to you, the visual part of it or the acoustic part of it? But we're going to talk about what the research actually shows. But I want to be really clear that there is no perfect solution. For those who are wondering what this is, by the way, it's a microscope image of a Perf screen. So that's what the little holes are there. And then the other one is a woven screen.
Your audio keeps going in and out like super loud than normal.
Really?
Thanks, Joe and Tell, for the recommendation on this mic.
Yeah, appreciate it, Joe.
I don't know what happened. I can't get my other mic quickly enough.
It's like some active gain control you have on the thing or something.
I turned it off. I don't know what it would be. All right, so the best HT sound and best sight tend to be at conflict with each other. The best sound is achieved with all speakers at a common height. Proper listening height places the tweeter at somewhere between, let's say, 35 and 40 inches or so. And often this places the speaker at around 1/3 up from the bottom of the screen. So here's an image of that. And so if you look at the image, you can see the center channel has to be behind the screen. There's no other way to do it. It would be too low otherwise. Mm-hmm. But there's a problem. And that's that screens really don't make very good speaker grills. They've got an issue, which is that those perforations cause a kind of diffraction. So you can see that when the sound wave hits the screen material, it acts as a barrier. And then those little holes in it, those perforations, the sound goes through it and they act like little sources, every one of them. which means that when the sound wave re-expands outside of that little hole, it interferes with itself at the other hole. And so what happens is you get this interference pattern that causes a lot of distortion. So having a surface that accurately reflects light doesn't allow the sound to penetrate unabated. There's issues. Direct view TVs are an even bigger problem. And actually, we're going to discuss that later. So Don and I have been working on developing our expertise in how to set up really, really large direct view TVs, basically.
Really like 16 foot by 9 foot, in fact.
Exactly. And how to get the sound right for those, which is a lot harder than it might seem. The advent of perforated screens was really the first attempt to address this, and they've been around a really long time. Cinemas have used them forever. We tend to call these perforated screens AT, or acoustically transparent, but they're not really totally acoustically transparent. So perf screens cause diffraction grating. And so here you can see that effect going on. And people probably know the term diffraction grating more from things like diffusers, where it's an intentional thing, but in this case, it's not really intentional or desirable. So when the sound waves hit the perforated barrier, the sound squeezes through those little pores at the surface. They emerge from the pores like a new source, as I mentioned before. The sound tends to wrap around the edges of that as well, and that's part of the problem that you start to see. And then the microperforations cause a ton of these little interferences across the whole surface. There's also comb filtering. Now, comb filtering is a little bit different. That tends to be the delayed energy from a reflection recombining with the direct signal and interfering with it. And so where that's coming from is actually primarily the space between the speaker and the baffle wall and the screen. So that distance between the two is the delay that you're seeing, but it causes this effect that you can see on the screen down on the lower right side there. So research into the audibility of comb filtering is pretty limited. There really isn't a lot. I didn't include this, but Toole had done a study on this where he had found it not to be all that audible. The problem is Toole's research was not related to the kind of comb filtering problem that we get from screens. More recently,
his research was about two speakers playing in mono, the same source, right?
Right. So more recently, there was this paper by, I'm going to probably mispronounce these names, Brunner, Meinpol, and Weinzel. I don't know. And they found, I apologize for horribly pronouncing those. They found that comb filtering was in fact quite audible. At shorter time differences, as would be found with screens, the level difference in the secondary source signal could be anywhere from 8 to 20 decibels below the fundamental and cause audible comb filtering. So here's why that's really important. Think about that. That means that the reflected sound coming off of that wall behind it, you could reduce its volume by as much as 20 decibels, and it was still causing audible comb filtering distortion. So we're going to get into why that's such a big deal. But in Gene's case, he mentioned putting all this foam on the wall, which was designed to absorb a lot of those reflections. And the problem is it only probably reduced them by about 10 decibels, which means that the comb filtering could very well still be audible. Now, here's the big problem, though. The way that they tested this did not include the diffraction grading that I was showing before through the perf screen. They did this actually by creating contrived signals that better mimic more what I would call room reflections that would cause this, rather than the reflections in that screen area. Now, there was another study that's been done by Elliott, Holland, and Newell that tested comb filtering, and they actually created these based on the comb filtering that would happen through a perforated screen. They figured that all out to make sure beforehand. It still didn't test the diffraction effects I was talking about, and what they found was that it was barely audible. So here's two different studies. One found it was quite audible, but as I said, the test was a little bit different and really more designed around room reflections. The other one found for screen perforations, at least, that it was audible, but not that audible. It wasn't a real big deal, but it wasn't a perfect test either. And they really didn't test the effect of that diffraction grading I was mentioning. So no studies to date have really attempted to detect the audibility of the perforated screen itself. In other words, all of these tests have relied on contrived signals. Nobody's ever figured out a simple way to do an A/B test, screen in place versus not. Don doesn't like my audio. Don, I know. I don't know what's going on.
Sorry, dude.
So which performs best, the microperforations or woven? Well, to be honest, based on this research, woven was a clear winner in terms of acoustic performance, but there may be other considerations for video, which we're going to discuss later. Video performance, for example, may be worse. So in an AES publication study by Newell, Garcia, and Holland, 2013, they found significantly worse comb filtering from perforated screens. They also found that increasing the angle and increasing the distance between the speaker and the screen improved the performance. But there's a problem with this one. So, I should also mention, they also had noted that adding absorption to the baffle and to the face of the speaker would very likely help improve the performance and reduce comb filtering effects, which is why we recommend doing that. But the ideal distance that they found between the speaker and the screen was 30 centimeters to 60 centimeters. So
that's like over a foot.
Right. Do you ever have that much distance between your screen and a speaker?
I mean, only, you do if you have a baffle wall and if it's designed that way. I mean,
yeah,
a baffle wall with a foot of distance between it and the screen. I think it's pretty uncommon.
I've seen it in some crazy high-end systems, but not a lot.
Yeah, and I think that the study that they were doing was more about commercial cinema. And in commercial cinema, that would be in a common, appropriate distance. But in residential stuff, most people aren't willing to give up that kind of floor space. So let's take a look at this. So here we've got the micro-perf screen on the left. We've got the woven screen on the right. And you can just see, I mean, look at the 2 centimeter spacing, right? It looks awful. And then you go to the right and you see the woven one, and it's like, well, looks kind of awful too. Looks less awful. Looks a whole lot less awful, but it still looks kind of awful, right? In fact, it doesn't look normal until I would say about 30 to 45 centimeters. That's when it starts to look a little bit more reasonable for the woven screen. Now, for the micro-perf, it's 60 centimeters seems to actually be the point at which it starts to look more reasonable. You can also see at the bottom that changing the angle seemed to improve things somewhat.
Right.
So now here's the Sepstrom, which is a kind of reflection analysis. It's showing how over time there were peaks in energy. It shows the reflections, basically. You can see that there was much stronger reflections in the micro-perf screen than there was in the woven screen that was affecting the signal. So again, we're seeing more evidence that there's a bigger problem with the micro-perf screen from an acoustic standpoint. Now, again, we don't know that this is audible. That isn't what they tested. All they did was measure it. Now, this is the polar response data that they looked at. And I showed it to you. These are not actually identical images. That was an accident. But you can, if you look carefully, you can see 2 centimeter spacing and 2 centimeter spacing. You can kind of compare. They're close enough that I think most would argue there isn't really a big difference. And the conclusion of the authors was there wasn't really any sort of discernible difference between the two. There were some.
So the polar response accounts for off axis, right?
Yeah, they were trying to see if putting a speaker behind a screen would have a negative effect on the off-axis response, which could also affect like different listeners at different positions seats, as well as sidewall. All right, so that's all really interesting, but I'm sure everybody wants to see what Gene's been talking about. So here we go. This is a completely unsmooth raw response taken in room. Now, Gene, you sent me a picture, but I couldn't really see well enough. How far away was the mic from the screen when you did this?
2 meters.
2 meters. So this is a 2 meter distance, and I remember seeing from the picture, you took the screen off the wall, and that's the blue measurement. Yep. And then you put the screen back on the wall. That was the orange measurement. Correct. Now, with the screen off of the wall, you turned on the correction that you guys had created to correct for the screen, and that's the green measurement, which shows what the effect of the screen basically is, what you had to correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can see really clearly that the blue one looks pretty normal, and the orange one has that classic comb filtering shape to it. And the correction obviously has the inversion of it in it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of loss. So if we smooth it, which makes it easier to see the trends, we can see a very smooth flat line with no screen. And then with the orange one, we see clearly comb filtering and not so smooth, and a lot of correction was necessary.
And it's important to note that the correction that we did to overcome all these losses, not every speaker can handle this kind of power requirement. So we boosted a good 12 or 13 dB at the high frequencies. Most speakers are dynamically limited. It just happens to be the fact that I have the RBH SVTRS system that tweeter has an output of over 120 dB clean, that we have the headroom to do it. But this is something very important to consider when you're putting speakers behind a perf screen, to make sure they have the dynamic range to handle a boost, if you're going to go with a vinyl screen and have the backing on it as well.
That's a really good point, Gene, because in the past, when we did large scale theaters or, medium-sized theaters where we were going to use an AT screen, I always tried to spec like a JBL Synthesis or Eclipse THX, something that's horn loaded with high efficiency, that had a lot of high output. that normally I wouldn't particularly myself like, but the AT screen, and we would EQ it up a little bit, but you have to have something with dynamic range. If you just put an audiophile type speaker behind an AT screen, you're going to be limiting yourself. And that's just experience speaking. You have to have a dynamic high output speaker, just like the speakers they use in movie theaters. I mean, they're just, almost shrill alone without equalization. But that's the kind of, you need something like you said with that dynamic range. That system that you have with that large EMT tweeter or AMT tweeter really has that kind of output. Most speakers don't.
Right.
Yeah, and I had worked on an install once where it had actually the CAF Uniq speakers. They were the in-wall. I believe they were THX rated, and one of the tweeters kept blowing, and we couldn't figure out why. And eventually what we figured out was it was Odyssey making its automatic correction of the screen, was overloading the tweeter and blowing it. And because that tweeter is concentrically loaded inside the coil, there was so much heating in there, and so such an inability to cool it that it just kept basically overheating, burning up. And that was the end of it. Yeah, that was the end of it. Happened over and over again. The fix ended up being to stop using Odyssey.
Or change the speaker in that case, because those concentric speakers can't play very loud.
That would have been a better fix, but they were in wall. He didn't want to rip up the wall. So this is the transfer function. And this, for those who aren't familiar, this is essentially a calculation of the response of the screen. Basically the effect it's having. And it's created by taking the difference between the measurement without the screen and with the screen. So it shows you the phase anomalies that are being created, especially at high frequencies. We see a complete phase switch for some reason. We can see that there's clear evidence of reflections at that around 1.5 kilohertz, and then again between 2 and 3 kilohertz. So that's clearly a reflection off of the wall between the screen and the wall or speaker.
And I have 3 inches of absorption behind that screen. So
well, and it very well could be right off the baffle, because you don't have foam on the baffle, right?
The team, we actually tell them we actually framed out your screen to give you more space to accommodate that. We actually moved it. Well, I forget how many inches out did we move it?
We built about a 4-inch frame around the whole screen.
It's also now, Gene, you wanted me to mention that it's worse than I said here. I said there was 10 dBs of loss, but actually, if you go out to 20 kilohertz, you can see we're probably closer to 12, 13 decibels of loss. So it's supposed to only have 6 dBs of high frequency attenuation at 20 kilohertz, and we're seeing basically twice that.
But I do have that black mesh on there.
That might be the black mesh that's designed to filter out light from coming through. We have a plan. We're going to remove that from the back of the screen, cover up the acoustic absorptive material, then cut out a space in the middle for the center channel to come through, and see if that changes that measurement.
Yep.
So now again, we're not comparing this to a woven screen. We're simply showing the effect of a acoustically transparent screen. This one happens to be a micro perf screen, and so the effect is a bit worse than it would be if it was woven. But all screens show at least some attenuation. So, the conclusion on the acoustical issues here are that woven screens tend to be better than perf screens based on well-executed research and the findings of many consumers and installers. The perforated screens introduce significant acoustic anomalies, as we showed. The audibility of these anomalies, though, is totally uncertain. We don't know. The attenuation is certainly fixable, but what about the comb filtering and the phase? That really isn't so fixable. You can apply FIR filters. Gene, you did that, but one of the things we noted was as you moved to the outer seats, some of the corrections started to fall apart. So it wasn't a perfect solution. Now, the other one that we already talked about was a lot of speakers can't handle 10 plus decibels of boost at 20 kilohertz. That would cause damage to them. So remember, though, all screens are imperfect. Even woven screens have some pretty big problems. And another issue that came up out of that research was that the ideal distance between the screen and the speaker turned out to be anywhere from 1 to 2 feet. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what about video? So one of the things was the only thing I could really find was this AccuCal AV report. And there was only one microperf screen in the entire analysis. The findings suggested pretty large differences between the acoustically transparent screens, even amongst woven screens. So in other words, not all screens were good. Just because it was woven didn't mean that it was a better, superior screen. A lot of them had color issues. A lot of them had not enough gain. And a lot of them also had a lot of attenuation. It just depended on which one it was. Now, I have to say, the acoustic effects that they mentioned, I'm sure the attenuation results are probably correct. I think they're a bit suspect, though. And the reason I say that was they kept claiming that there was a smooth loss with these screens, except for all the actual data I saw from more sophisticated research, like the earlier Newell study I showed, did not show a smooth loss. And Gene did not see a smooth loss either. He saw comb filtering. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I will note is that while there was some gain issues across the screens, it was really more screen to screen than it was woven versus perf. And the micro perf also had a gain issue. It wasn't perfect. The texture was subjectively discussed, and it was found that both perf and woven screens had noticeable textures on them. You could see the perforations or you could see the weave out to somewhere between 9 and 12 feet. It just depended on which screen, on how far out you had to be. The color accuracy was tested, and there were pretty large differences found for that. Some surfaces were color neutral, while others had significant errors. They didn't test any other video aspects, though, which to me seemed a little bit odd. So Center Stage, which is Seymour's screen, ended up being the best screen that they tested for the acoustically transparent based on gain and the decibels loss. So there was only 2 decibels of loss on it. And then it ended up being just about 0.94, it's just about 1. So it was pretty good with not a lot of errors. So that one did pretty well. The only micro perf they tested was the Audio Vision, which I believe is a daylight screen. And that one had 6 decibels of loss. But I want to point out the ClearPix 3 is also a woven screen, and it had 7 decibels of loss. The Falcon is
interesting.
A screen. It had 4 decibels of loss. So it wasn't like the perf was automatically worse than all the others. It is the second worst. So it is among the worst. But there's a bunch of woven ones that are pretty close to or just as bad. There just happens to be a couple of really good woven screens that are clearly better in terms of the loss.
Do you think that has something to do with if maybe a woven screen is meant for 4K, whereas with more loss, whereas the one that's only for 1080p resolution has better audio capability because there's more space?
I do think that could be part of it. The Center Stage UF is a smoother one, though, and it has only 2 decibels of loss. That's another one from Seymour. I like that screen, actually, but it's got pretty low gain. It's only 0.8, so a lot of light loss on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the balance that we need, and that's why we have Jason here, because I want to be honest with you. My experience with woven screens is that they substantially affect the video. They just don't look near as good as a perf screen. That's the bottom line.
And I think that's the next part of the discussion. So I happen to be somebody who likes the woven screens, but I'm very much an audio guy, not a video guy. So to me, the video is good enough and the audio is better. Now, what don't we know about the video quality differences? What did these studies not examine? Why hasn't there been more? What should consumers do? This is where I think Jason can help us. I mean, one of the questions I had even about this was, like, from a resolution standpoint, there's arguments that one screen has better resolution than the other because the perforations or the woven texture is causing a loss of resolution. I couldn't find research that shows that, but it seems like you could put up a 4K, for instance, image of some kind and like figure this out, couldn't you?
Yeah, what it really comes down to is like pixel size. Almost you can think of it like pixel size versus, when the things are woven, the gaps in between the horizontal and vertical material that's weaving everything together. So, in a theoretical situation, if you had small pixels and larger gaps and larger openings, then that certainly could soften the picture and kill your dynamic range and do all kinds of weird things. And it's funny because you guys mentioned, like, I said this before, but audio and video are so closely related in a lot of ways. Gene mentioned headroom earlier, right? Like, so if we take a fairly bright projector and put it on a reasonably sized screen, we have lots of headroom. Now the projector doesn't have to work so hard. Your colors are more saturated, your blacks are better, and all these other things that come with that. But as far as like video, we've done some testing before where we would have 2 screens, one behind the other, one woven and one perforated. And honestly, guys, at a reasonable distance where people like us would normally sit or recommend people to sit, put one screen down, look at the video, drop the other screen down, pull the first screen up. And it's like, you're like squinting to see some of the differences. So from a video aspect, between the 2 types of acoustically transparent screens, I don't think, to be honest, it's really terribly important. The things that we're more worried about is the room and getting the projector and the screen, making that right combination. And, of course, when we're looking at screens, we're looking for things like neutrality. I think they mentioned that in that Accupel or that article that we were talking about before. But, too much gain can do some really weird things. You start to see some hot spots as you, maybe move your head around or stand up and sit down. But there's screens out there that we measure that are too blue, and you guys know the whole idea with too much blue, it makes the image seem brighter. But if it's bluer, it's not right. So, having the screen be neutral, off-axis viewing, just like an LCD flat panel, that's super important. The color of the screen, the material of the screen, all those little things might not seem like they matter too much, but you add them all together, and that completes the whole package. So, from our standpoint, the type of acoustically transparent screen, not that big of a deal, but the material and the gain and matching things up to each other is really what's important to us.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, on some of those higher gain screens, and I know there are micro perf versions, I've experienced this in the past. Sometimes you get sparkles on the image.
Yes. And I noticed that right away. It's like a kind of a pet peeve of mine. And it's funny because when we're dealing with, especially residential or even professional theaters, you don't have to go with a high gain screen, so you don't notice it. Where I notice these types of things is when I'm in like maybe a conference room or a school or something, and they've got a big giant screen, big giant projector, and all the lights are on. You start moving your head around, and depending on your angle and stuff, you do certainly see sparkles. And it just has to do with material, the coating they put on it. In fact, if I remember correctly, I don't remember the manufacturer, but we were talking to one of them one time, and part of the material that they coat the screen with is made out of crushed seashells, like ground down really, really, really fine. So you get this, screen material that, from a certain angle with the right amount of light, it lights the place up, but it has a lot of gain. So if you need that much gain, and you guys nailed it before, there's always compromises. High gain screen, bright room, bright projector, terrible dynamic range. Dark room, big screen, too small of a projector, bad dynamic range. So, getting everything to match up is the most important thing. I've said this before, I'll say it a million times. The biggest mistake that we see is putting the wrong type of screen in the wrong type of room and not considering, like with amplifier power, we see the same thing in projectors, not considering when the projector says 3,000 lumens, that it's not really 3,000 lumens. And one more thing I'll point out too, while we're talking about it, a lot of the screen manufacturers who make the transparent screens, they will have like a measurement or a value for how much light is lost when it passes through the screen. And like amplifier power, it's not always true because there's so many unknown factors. So, it's just like you guys said before, the room makes the biggest difference. Combining everything with the right materials, the right screen, the right projector, that's the important thing when we talk about video.
So let Uncle Don put a little bit of input on this.
Sure.
Because in years past, we were working with 98-inch screens, 110, 107s. You remember that, Jay? That was the norm. So, and we're going to talk about horizontal center channel and speakers versus speakers behind the screen.
Right.
Only really ultra high end theaters that most people watching this couldn't afford or do even knew about acoustically transparent screens. And we were putting, to be honest, JBL synthesis systems, real high output with equalization in the early days. So it wasn't so much a factor. But now with the resolution, the light output of the modern projector, I mean, for $3,500, you can get a pretty damn amazing. You can get a projector now for $3,500 that would destroy $30,000 projector 10 years ago. That.
1,000,000%.
So the game has changed, and so now we're in a world of compromises. All right. Yes, we do an AT screen. It's going to affect the sound. It just by nature and by design it is. How do we deal with it? I want to tell you this from a professional standpoint. Most people, first and foremost, care about the video, not the audio file. And I care more about the audio, honestly, but most people care about the video. So that's something we have to take in consideration. I haven't done and I've done very few woven screens. So if I'm off, sorry if I'm off kilter on this, but most of the screens I've done have been micro perf because it seems like the picture is superior on those.
Yeah, and it could come down to just a preference thing like that, but I mean, you guys were mentioning before, like giving enough space behind the screen itself to make the audio a little bit better. And for video, that's actually a pretty positive thing too, because if you think about it, you know, if you have a speaker right up against the screen and it's pumping, it makes the screen wiggle,
Fluttering
you know,
a little bit. Yeah.
and man, you can see that from a mile away. And you know, God forbid it's a drop down screen, you know, it's not a frame. So, you know, now the AC kicks on, the speaker's pumping, and now the screen's like shaking all over the place. So, you know, there's a few things to consider there. And with us video guys, we're always worried about the noise floor for you audio guys. So, you know, we're thinking about things like, oh my God, this projector is, you know, loud. What do we do with it? And we start doing hush boxes and stuff in the back ceiling. So the video is compromising with the audio, and getting the two to really perform well together is possible. But the old famous Joel says this all the time. He says, you can do it, just bring money.
bring lots of money.
Now,
anything's possible with time and money.
Yeah. We're testing right now a pretty well-known, what we might call a mid-level sort of brand. It's $1,900. It's 3,000 lumens, laser phosphor, and it rips. You know, so when you're dealing with issues with light loss through the acoustically transparent screen, what do? Throw more light at it, you know, and we can do that very easily now for not a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a renaissance for video right now.
Absolutely.
So, Gene, why don't you talk a little bit about what we've done on the Audioholics reference theater in experimentation by adding acoustic treatments? You know, we've done several things on that.
Yeah, so initially we just hung the screen on the wall. We put the center channel behind it, and the first listen, I immediately heard all the high frequencies were gone. Like you could just hear it in the pink noise between the left speaker, right speaker, and then going to the center, and you knew it was dead.
So the main speakers are towers, and the center channel, just so people that don't know, the center channel is put behind the screen. Yeah,
and I'll show a picture here. Just this is nice. Basically it. So yeah, the center channel's right here in the middle, and the speakers are to the left and right.
This is one thing that's always bugged me too about putting the speakers behind the screen. I mean, ideally, you know, in a cinema, you'd have them all behind the screen, all the same plane, right? But you have these big, beautiful, you know, art. They look like a piece of art type speakers like those, and you want to shove them behind a screen? Are you crazy? So you know, that's always another compromise you have to think about too. You've got these beautiful speakers, and now you're shoving them into a closet, and no one can ever see them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to make the speakers kind of the focal point of the room.
Totally. I don't blame you.
Really impressive. Yeah.
Well, plus it's kind of it's a test room. I mean, it's literally a laboratory. So I know there's been some people like, I can't believe you didn't do a formal theater, you know, where the treatments are all hidden and it has kind of but the whole idea behind this entire project, especially this room, is having a room that we could change treatments, we could change speakers, we could put things in a room. So it really didn't behoove a sustained, you know, installation where you can't really change things out.
Yeah. So what we did initially was we framed out about a 4-inch using 2x4s all around the screen. And then I started with putting some like 3-inch absorbers that had like a little perf board on it behind the screen. I didn't see a whole lot of benefit from that. So I took those off, and I, believe it or not, I went to Walmart and I've got the memory foam, like a 3-inch thick foam mattress. And I cut that up and I hung it on, and I nailed it to the wall. that's exactly what I did. And we basically encased that whole opening except for the center channel. And then I put some foam on the baffle of the center channel, you know, to the left and right of the tweeter, and as much as I could without touching any woofers or anything like that. And then we hung the screen back up, and it did help. It definitely helped transient response in the mid bass. I saw some cleanup there, but it also helped with some of the off-axis combing that Matt's talking about. So what happened when we did the FIR room correction is we got a perfect response right at the money seat, and the seat to the left and the right were still pretty good. But when you got all the way to the far left and right seats, you would see a bigger effect of comb filtering, because the FIR filter was really optimized for a narrow area, and it was increasing that comb filtering response that we were seeing. So my goal now, hopefully, is if we take that black mesh off, we won't have to boost the treble as much, and maybe we'll get rid of some of the additional comb filtering by not having that second layer, basically a second layer of absorption between the speaker and the screen.
And the main purpose, as I understand it, of that black layer is light reflecting when it passes through the perforations and hits the wall and the speakers behind it. It's supposed to help absorb some of that. So if you've got a black wall that's got a very matte finish, or you put maybe some like black velour or something back there, you wouldn't need that layer anymore anyway, I would think.
The stuff that we like is Duvetine, because that stuff sucks up like every photon. It's really, really good stuff.
What's it called? What's
Duvetine?
It called? Duvetine?
Yeah. Gene, I love your hack.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. And you can do paint. I mean, paint's fine. Matte is kind of ideal, but it's ugly. But if you start getting into satin's usually okay too. You start getting into semi-gloss and gloss, and now you're reflecting everything, so it doesn't really matter anymore. But one thing I do want to mention too, and Gene, you got my mind going on this when you gave us your life hack there on the foam mattress. But one thing that we have to think about too with screens and contrast and that type of stuff is the masking. So I got my hands on an 85-inch 235 perfectly neutral screen, and it's a really cool little screen, and it's 235. So what do I do when I watch 16:9 content? Well, if there's bars on the sides, that ends up hurting the contrast. Your eyes feel like your eyes look at it like it's more gray than black, and that's just how our eyes work. But what I've done in the past, and many others too, especially if you're maybe on a budget or you're doing DIY, but you can make yourself just small panels, wrap them in Duvetine and Velcro them to the where the black bars would be, and you got a little cool life hack right there that doesn't cost much money and really, really, really helps a lot. Any light spill or anything that used to look light gray is now black like it should be. So you get more contrast, and now the picture's matching the screen the right shape and size, and it works out better either way. And of course, you guys have all seen a million times the really high dollar, really nice, motorized ones. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we like to see.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, black wrap memory foam mattress toppers are way better than motorized.
Yeah.
Come on.
And Gene, what'd you pay for that foam? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was about $120.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
Still cheaper than buying, acoustic materials.
Yeah, what everybody doesn't know is that Gene was asking me what to put back there. So my preferred material, what I normally do, is a little more professional, which is a kind of material that's called duct liner. It's used inside of HVAC ducts. It's black, and it's got a scrim layer that's very matte, absorbs a lot of light. It's easy to work with, and you can get it in 2-inch thicknesses. The density is pretty decent on it, such that you absorb a relatively good amount of low frequencies for 2 inches thickness. That's what I wanted to put back there, but it was like $500 a roll
to ship it.
Like
approaching a subject with pose is like taking the red pill. Like, I don't know how deep that rabbit hole is going to go. You know what I mean? So sorry.
I was pushing him to do it. I was like, come on, you just spend the money. You can get it locally. It'll be cheaper. And he goes, I'm not spending that much money on the fiberglass.
You don't know how cheap Gene is.
Yeah, I know.
Right,
Next thing I know,
cheap.
he's like, he had already done it. He just like, I put memory foam on the wall. I'm like, that might work, I guess.
Actually, that was Shane Rich RBH's idea.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out to be a good one. And somebody's pointing out
great.
that they had actually contacted me about that and said that I had told them to probably put fiberglass on the wall too, and they stuck up memory foam instead, and it worked really well for them. So apparently memory foam is the miracle acoustic.
It's very dense. I mean,
I just wanted to point out what a baller De La Sala is now with his motorized blinds and shades in the background.
Yeah,
like
fancy.
Iconic.
Yeah,
he's a pimp. He's a pimp.
I don't have the remote with me, otherwise I would.
Whatever. We're going to integrate that in. Hey, listen. So I want to talk about the 800-pound gorilla, and I know Mark Dahlquist. Mark's become a pretty good friend of mine. He runs a home theater enthusiast forum on Facebook, which is a huge forum, and I have to say, there's a lot of really intelligent do-it-yourself guys. I mean, educated and whatnot. Now, Mark's basically told me tonight, he's like, look, man, it's either behind the screen or you're just an asshole. So, but I have to disagree because I've done a shit ton of theaters with horizontal center channels below the screen that sounded amazing, and nobody could tell where they were coming from. And you can argue that to the cows come home, but it's just a reality. However, now that we're in the world of 120 inches of small screen, because really that's what we're in now. What was your screen in your old house, Gene? 110?
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, either 110 or 120.
I'm like, would you look at that? Look at that little thing. Now you're 150. Now the standard now is 120 is the smallest. Now we're doing 150s, Shit, I'm doing a lot of 200 to 220 diagonal. So that center channel is now being brought real low or brought real high, as to whereas that screen might have been a little bit higher in years past. So that center channel was just a little bit, maybe just a little bit lower of the main. So let's talk about that a little bit, Matt.
About putting the center channel lower than the main.
Yeah, a horizontal center channel.
I mean, you know, I don't agree with you, but it's fine because it's.
That's all right. Because you're theoretical and I'm real.
Here we go. This is what he's asking basically. A horizontal MTM is a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, so the issue that came out of it, and there's stories behind how this originated, but when you take a speaker that's got the amount of dynamic output you need for your left and your right, and then you got to make a center channel that matches and it can fit under a TV, it's got to be a low profile design, and that ends up being these MTMs. So the MTM design can be okay. There are versions of it that measure pretty decent, but a lot of them have this lobing error problem. That's basically
a horizontal MTM, not a
horizontal MTM. Right.
Okay.
Right. They all have it. I mean, they're all technically that style. It's just that normally it's in the vertical. When it's a vertically arranged one, it's the vertical nulls, and they're way off. You'd have to be like standing in the back corner to hear it. Not a big deal. But when you're talking about the horizontally arranged one, that person next to you, or on the left or the right, they could very well be in the nulls. It just depends on the design, how closely spaced that. We've covered this before, but how closely spaced the woofers out to the tweeter relative to the crossover point is a big part of what causes it. The directivity of the driver is affected as well. So there's some companies that have done a better job than others, but there are really some pretty lousy. There used to be a lot of really lousy MTM center channels. They've gotten better than they used to be when this problem started to be understood.
Way better.
Yeah, and so one of the problems you get with that is that the whole point of the three speakers is that they need to be timbre matched. They need to have the same spectral balance, and the reflections need to match too. Mm-hmm. And so when you've got something like a horizontally arranged center channel, that's not typically true unless the designer of the speakers really understands those issues and designs them right. Just having the same drivers does not guarantee timbre matching. There's more to it than that.
Agreed.
So one of the easiest fixes to this problem that guarantees perfect timbre matching across speakers is you just use the exact same speaker for the left, center, and right. Happens to be my preference, but there are, as I said, there are definitely some MTM center channels built today that do have a pretty good match to the left and the right. I've actually heard systems too. Revell actually had a really good center for a while, measured pretty well. And so I've seen people. Revell?
Revel? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. That's the French version.
However you want to pronounce it. Yeah, Matt's version.
But so
I've seen systems where they had three of those under the screen, in order to keep the height the same, and sounded pretty decent. But, my experience is that when the speakers are too low, the image is too low. So whether it's three at the same height but below the screen, or a center channel below the screen but the left and the right at the right position, I feel like I can tell. Now maybe it's in my head. Maybe if you hid the speaker from me, it wouldn't be that way. But my experience,
there is a way around that.
That's kind of true.
There is a way around that. Yamaha has a DSP processing. If you use height channels at the front of the room, they have a center channel dialogue lift, and it actually uses the front effect channels to raise the image of the center. It actually works. I've tested it. But the issue with the MTM lobing on a really well-designed MTM horizontally mounted, you don't really start seeing bad off-axis lobing till about 20 to 30 degrees off-axis.
Right.
And usually the distance you have to be at that angle means you're so close to a sidewall that you're in a shitty seat to begin with. You're close to a side channel.
Right.
You're near a surface. You're not in a good place. That's where you put the mother-in-law.
That's a great point. So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, and for video, it's the same, guys. I mean, you're that much off axis, and it's no fun.
Yeah.
So we have to take a step back here, Audioholics, and understand that the majority of the people that watch this don't have the luxury of building a baffle wall. They don't have the luxury of, buying an acoustically transparent screen, or if they do, they have a smaller room. So we have to understand that not everybody can do that. And we're not saying that having a horizontal center channel, which represents probably 97% of what people have for surround sound, is necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it's a ratio of the size of your room, the height of the ceiling, the distance you set back, and the size of the screen. If you're doing a 110-inch screen, it might not be that bad a thing to have a horizontal center channel and a pair of towers around it. You're not going to experience it. But if you have a 160-inch screen that's really close to your ceiling and your floor, and your center channel is very low, absolutely you're going to get effects from that. So that's we need to take a step back and understand not everybody has that. I know it's about acoustically transparent screens, but I know people are watching it going, damn, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, you know what I mean? Like, let's be realist about it.
Well, and I know there's video purists too that for even projected systems, they would never use an AT screen. They're going to only use just a standard style screen because it's got for them the best image quality. And then what are you going to do for sound? You know, I mean, they may be video purists, but they still want to hear the movie.
Center.
Yeah, that subject can very easily create a civil war in the video community. It's just one of those things, man.
Yeah.
No, well, seriously. I mean, that's something that we need to address now. So Gene and Matt and myself I can't say any locations or anything, but we're working on basically about $1 million theater right now. So instead of a projection screen, now I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is a trend towards the future. We're going to have a 16-foot by 9-foot micro LED screen that I'm telling you looks like a damn TV. It's amazing. So now we have a whole set of new challenges. Obviously, Jason's got challenges from calibrating this, but now we've got new challenges on how we're going to get the audio around this massive screen to sound correct with really high ceilings.
Yeah. So this is a whole new world for audio. This is a completely different way of approaching the problem. And the reality is I think a lot of installers and integrators are going to be really challenged by the switch from projector systems to these really large scale 150 to 200 plus inch, basically direct view TVs. They are direct view TVs that are just giant. So a lot of people who are watching this, you might say, well, you just put a left speaker to the left of the screen, a right speaker to the right of the screen, and a center below it. Well, you got to remember, we're not talking about a 65 to, let's say, 85 inch screen. We're talking about 100. We're talking like 150 to 200 inches, if not more. And so when they get to be that big, you're talking about, of course, a massive room, 20-foot ceilings, things like that. But you're also talking about only having maybe 2 feet between the bottom of the ground, basically, and the screen and top in the screen. If you put a speaker down that low, for instance, you're going to have 2 problems. One is you're not going to get seat coverage. And 2, it's going to sound like it's coming way below the screen. I mean, you're talking about it's a much different problem. If you put it above, you'll get your seat coverage, but now the image sounds like it's coming from above unless you spend a lot of time carefully tuning that.
So there may be a way to do a DSP trick by having a center channel above and below the screen.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's
like Trinov has technology for that.
Yeah, they wrote a white paper on how to do that, and that is one of the approaches that's happening now. But it's not as simple as just putting it above and below. So yeah, you put your left and your right above and below, your center above and below, and your right one above and below. But Gene, you were talking about a paper that Tool did where he found comb filtering effects in the center phantom image of a left and right speaker. It's the same problem, except for now you have it across the board. The 2 speakers are going to interfere with each other at that center pin. So you're going to get a center phantom image that's across the screen. You're going to get it exactly the way you want it, but you're going to have a lot of distortion that gets added to that. So you really have to know what you're doing and carefully integrate that on site. It's not something that can be done automatically very easily. Trinov happens to have a white paper that explains how to do it, and their processor has the ability. There's probably a lot of others that can, but I would venture a guess that you would struggle to do this with typical receivers and processors. And so I think this is going to be one of those things we're going to need to work on as we move forward.
It's the future. I mean, I see people comment on here like, oh, you got to have your speakers behind there. That's it. That's all you're going to do. Let me tell you something, dude. You evolve or die. Technology's changing. Projectors in general are going to go away at some point versus as large scale displays become more affordable. Now, obviously, audio is going to change too with filaments and whatnot, but I'm saying you evolve or die. There's ways to work around it, and we're on the cutting edge trying to find ways to do that. But at some point, because you just can't get the picture quality from a projector that you can get from some of these displays. You can say whatever you want. I saw it, viewed it, and I'm kind of a videophile myself. It's amazing even now, and I can imagine when it's going to be in the near future. So we have to adjust ourselves and accommodate that. That's the bottom line.
Well, and I'm curious what Jason thinks, because again, this isn't really my area, but my understanding is that when Dolby, for instance, were doing their research on Dolby Vision, that the maximum brightness that they needed on a display to actually achieve that full HDR image they were trying to achieve was so bright, they made a custom display for it, but like there's no consumer displays that are even close to that. And projectors aren't even in the ballpark, right?
Yeah, there's a Dolby mastering display. You can only rent, you can't buy. It's 40 inches, $42,000. It's liquid cooled and needs its own circuit. I mean, this is like, and now we're talking. Now here's the interesting part. It's that elaborate, and it's 4,000 nits. So we're not even like
crazy.
We're not even nearly close to that ceiling of 10,000. And just to be super clear too, guys, and for people who might be listening, this was more of a comment we heard kind of at the very beginning of HDR was 1,000 nits. Are you crazy? That's going to blind me. Well, not if it's just a reflection really, really quick of, the sun bouncing off of a lake or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because we see these really nice, really high end projectors a lot. And, you pop on SDR and it looks fantastic. You put in a Blu-ray, it looks fantastic. And you go to HDR and it still looks really good. It's a lot more colorful, but
it doesn't have the brightness. Yeah.
It doesn't have the dynamic range. It just doesn't.
It just doesn't.
And the issue that we're running into with this too is that the EOTF doesn't quite track right. So basically, there's a set in stone EOTF. So this level is this bright. This level is this bright. This level is this bright, and that's it. So when we have a problem, the problem we have with projectors sometimes is if the line is supposed to go like this and the projector is only this bright, as you go up, and so basically it's tracking too dark. Now you're like, why is the picture so dark? Why can't I see shadows? Yeah. So in a lot of cases, like this is going to sound crazy, but you got to trust me. In a lot of cases, if you can configure the system so it's SDR but with wide color gamut, more people seem to like that. It's crazy.
I've seen that.
And they're doing all kinds of things with projectors now. Like I went to Sony training and they have the X1 chip processor in it, and they're trying to enhance HDR to compensate for the lack of nits. I mean, that's what they're doing. Whereas these large scale, yes, right now, peasants like me and most everybody here can't afford a $200,000, 220-inch micro LED display. However, remember, I was selling 60-inch plasmas in 2002 for $18,000. Yeah, Fujitsu's. So at some point down the road now, and there's also cost because these micro LEDs, you have to change bulbs on them. I mean, there's some definite. You get $100,000 Sony projector and a $15,000 screen. You're not talking that much more to have something that's just absolutely a superior product. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm an audio guy, and I love the idea of the speakers coming through the screen. But listen, it's technology progression. Eventually, consumers are going to want it because the picture's it's like a TV. You know, I mean, you just can't to achieve that with a projector. I don't care what you think you got. You're just never going to have with a projector what you have with an LED backlit or an LCD LED backlit TV. Let's clarify the nomenclature.
It's physics, right? Like a self-emitting display, right? The pixel turns off, it's black. And when you're talking a projection system, when light is coming out of something, you can't make it. I mean, no matter how low energy or how low you set the bulb power or anything like that, light is still coming out, and your blacks are never, ever going to be like you'd see on an OLED. And it's interesting too, because, you might go see a movie in a Dolby cinema. One of my first experiences was watching Black Panther in Scottsdale, Arizona, when there was like 10 Dolby theaters in the entire country. And with those 6 chip lasers, those 6 laser projectors that are in these Dolby theaters, the laser's fast enough that in between scenes, it can go black. So for the first time in my life, I saw that big of an image go black, and I went, holy crap. And then when the movie started, I'm looking at the dynamic range and the color and really deep saturated colors, even though it's a really dark scene. And we're like, dude, this is nuts. So, I'm not here to say projectors suck. I mean, by any means, we see some really nice, we see some really nice ones. But Don's kind of right, though. I mean, there's going to be a point where Those little modular systems are just going to snap together like Legos, and you can build whatever size you want. In fact, one of the very, very, very early ISF guys, his name is Kevin Miller. He's up in New York. I talked to him a few days ago, and he was up in some penthouse in the top of some place, and windows everywhere, downtown New York or in Manhattan, something like that. And they had a 10-foot wide micro LED, and he was there to calibrate it. And it was just cool because you were in a penthouse type situation with tons of windows and these beautiful views. And you had this gigantic screen that still looked really, really, really good. And that's where we're going to be. Yeah.
I mean, if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, if somebody came to me with a $400,000 budget, which happens, says I want an ultimate kick-ass theater, it definitely would have been like, $90,000 Sony or Barco. Yeah. But after seeing what I saw with these micro LEDs and experience, I know this Andy guy's like, I'll stick with what's been good for 120 years. Well, you do that, brother, because let me tell you something. Shit's changing. And from what I saw, if I was doing a theater, I would damn sure want this 16 by 9 foot micro LED over any projector ever made in history. I used to double stack CRTs. I've done $100,000 Barcodes. You know what? This destroyed any picture you've ever seen from a projector. Destroyed it. And that's
nice.
Science.
The one that Kevin was working on, it was 10 feet wide and it was $400,000. So, but to your point, I remember when I worked at Sound Device before I could drink, it was, we were slinging Pioneer plasmas, 42 inches, 480p.
People still have them, won't get rid of them.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah.
Nobody will ever get rid of a Pioneer. They will be buried with those.
The nice thing about those too is if you live in a cold, if you live in a cold area, you don't need a fireplace. You just turn on your plasma and you're good. Especially the old ones. Yeah.
But they, you know what I'm talking about, Jay? How many times have people said, "Oh no, I don't want to ever," because I paid $12,000 for this thing. I mean, listen, technology changes. You either evolve or die. I know right now, like today, projectors reign supreme. But I'm telling you, this micro LED display that I saw was life changing. How good! I mean, it literally looked like an LED TV, only it was 220 inches diagonal.
And don't guys, we're talking years from now. I mean, this is going to be
$215,000. Yeah,
this is going to be a long process, and we'll probably get to a point where you buy enough Legos to build a 65-inch TV, and then 2 years later you buy some more Legos, and now you got a 110-inch TV. But
you're right.
If I had to predict, I mean, we're talking a decade.
Or less than a decade.
I think within 5 years,
I was selling 60-inch Fujitsu plasmas for $18,000. Now you can buy an 85-inch Vizio for under probably around $1,000, $1,200. I'm saying, like it's coming.
I think in 5 years we're going to see these start to approach the maybe $10,000 to $15,000 range for some versions. At the smaller end, but still big by normal. Like we're probably going to be talking 120 inch.
Yeah,
so I think within 10 years they're going to be $1,000.
So let me tell you, I asked the guy who's the manufacturer of these. I said, how much would a 120-inch version of this cost? He said $50,000 right now for $50,000. So 120-inch screen and the right, Sony laser projector at say $20,000. You're at $30,000 right now for it with a $10,000 screen. That's not that big a difference. I don't think it's going to take a decade. I think it's going to take less than 5 years to where people that are doing. Yeah, I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And Jason, what's the upper end of projectors in terms of nits? It's a couple hundred, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you a good example. I was called in to a theater down in Sarasota, right on St. Armand Circle. I mean, beautiful neighborhood, right on the water, that kind of situation. Gigantic house, 10,000 square foot house. And I was really, really excited because I'm talking to the integrator and he goes, yeah, it's a Sony GTZ 380. And I'm like, oh boy, because this is the big brother, the new version of the
K one.
Yeah. So Sony had the 5000 ES, right? And they've had it now for 3 or 4 years, and it's a 5,000 lumen projector. And we've lit up some crazy screens with that projector. So here comes the 10,000 lumen version, right? And you guys have seen it. It's the size of a coffee table. It's an absolute monster.
Yeah, we did that demo with it, remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
I got 2 of them over here.
Yeah. They called me in and they said, let's get it dialed in and whatnot. It was a 17-foot wide screen. Okay. 10,000 lumen projector calibrated. We were 285 nits.
Wow.
Which is high.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah, very high.
Especially for that big. And
Yeah,
another good example, Joel Silver, my mentor, he has I don't want to say I don't know how we were doing with brands and stuff here, but I'll just say it's a $35,000 to $40,000 projector, and he's lighting up. You guys trust me on this, but he's lighting up a 102 or 106 inch screen, and it rips. I mean, it's the same principle as putting an LS1 motor into a Miata. You know, very powerful projector, smaller screen. If you guys saw his room and the way things were laid out, it would make total sense because he's not that far from it, and it absolutely shreds. So, you know, looking at a system like that, I mean, of course, you're going to get some high numbers. Now, what we would really like to see, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I would love to see 100 nits on a 120 inch screen, you know, and you can do it, but you need a lot of power behind it. So, you know, in a studio type situation, we're aiming for 100, an SDR at least. For a theater type situation, 100 is still plenty because you have to consider the size of the picture.
Right.
It sounds low, but it's not.
And then what's the nits that's sort of the upper end of what we actually want with a perfectly produced HDR image?
So we're limited right now on the better technology. If, you know, of course, we can get a whole conversation about OLED versus LED LCD, but you know, all the benefits that come with OLED, they don't get that bright. So we're getting to a point where a movie might be mastered at 1,000 nits, and we're looking at it at 650, 750 nits at the most. And the sacrifice there is some of the specular highlights that are in the very, very, very brightest part of the picture, which a lot of people might not notice anyway. But you start getting into some of these newer LED LCDs that are 2,000 nits, close to 3,000 nits now. So the three tiers are 1,000, 4,000, 10,000. Those are kind of the stepping stones for the future, and we'll get there. I've seen a prototype of a 10,000 nit display. It sounds like it might be bright, but there was so much headroom though that it was really, really easy to watch. And no matter where you looked on the screen for the demo content they were showing, nothing was clipped, nothing was missing, everything was there, and it was very, very appealing and very easy to watch. And I thought that was pretty cool, but. You know, it gets into the whole thing of
it's like having a really high dynamic range speaker.
It's like the 140 dBs of video.
Yeah, it doesn't. The system doesn't have to work that hard because there's so much dynamic range and so much header. Gene, you were saying that exactly about speakers before, but you know, as we get brighter, the good thing about this new standard, we call it Rec 2020, is we have a lot of room to grow into it. So right now we're starting to see some products that are right at that P3 color space, and we're going to eventually grow out to 2020. And the whole idea is as we grow out to 2020, we're also going to grow up in luminance too. So eventually the holy grail is going to be a TV that can do 10,000 nits and do perfect Rec 2020 color gamut.
So Jason,
we'll get there.
Have you calibrated a micro LED?
Nope. I've seen four. I've seen four of them.
Yeah,
haven't got my hands on one.
Thing. So I guess that brings us to this whole conversation of the original idea was, what are the compromises of having an acoustically transparent screen? But that kind of leads us into our next footprint, which I know Matt and I, along with Gene, are really trying to figure out how we can have these large scale. I know there's some companies like, what's that one you sent me where they were reflecting off the center off of the screen, Matt?
Yeah. I forgot the company now. I should
I
know
remember
this.
you talking about that too.
Yeah, the Myers, right? Wasn't it?
Myers Sound.
Yeah.
So they're a pro audio
I don't
company.
like that idea. I mean,
I actually think it's really cool. I'd like to go to
it's rocket surgery though, dude.
Yeah. So, well, I'll explain a little bit what it is, and then I'll say that, like, I think for us to do it at a residential level is going to require a little bit of experimentation to get the math right. But the idea of it is, imagine that the screen is not just reflecting light, but it's reflecting sound, which for people who understand acoustics, you take any speaker, you aim it at a wall, that wall constitutes a reflector, and it will reflect it back like a mirror perfectly. As long as that's a flat wall and there's nothing on it and there's no absorption, the sound that comes back will be perfect. And in fact, if the speaker doesn't radiate any sound to the side or any sound behind it or any meaningful amounts of sound, then the reflection off the wall is your direct sound. That's what you hear as if it's the source, even though it's not, it's the speaker. So imagine you take those speakers and you stick them up in the air, like up near the ceiling, aim them down at a giant 200-inch screen, then you can have a left, center, and right up above, but what you hear is the sound coming right off the screen. It's sort of the concept of putting it behind the screen, that perforation's in it, but instead we're doing it the other way around. So as long as the speaker's directivity is basically controlled enough, and as long as you got the math right to have everything aimed the way it's supposed to be, it'll sound just like the screen is basically radiating the sound. So I think it's a
surgery.
brilliant idea. The problem is getting all that right, getting everything aimed right, because if the sound starts to spray off to the side of the screen, for instance, then you're going to start getting reflections off of all of that. You're going to get diffraction around the edge of the screen, and that's going to create some distortions that would be audible, undesirable.
So Gene, I know that you've recently with like your family room system, you've kind of come to a believer of like architectural and angled sound. You know how good your family room sounds. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm using Paradigm Premier 800Fs for the towers, the 500C, which it's not an MTM, it's a WTMW. So you have the tweeter, a mid-range below it, 2 woofers on the side, and that just opens
better
up
design,
better off-axis listening. So, and what we did for the surrounds is I didn't want to put speakers I wanted to put speakers on the sidewalls. You talked me out of it. It was a good call because it would have looked ridiculous in a formal dining area to have speakers.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. So we got angled speakers for the surrounds, the Paradigm Elite 80As, I believe.
For the rears and the 5.2.4.
Right. So those are the mid-range and the tweeter are on an angled baffle, and those fire at the listening area. And then we've got 4 Atmos speakers firing down, and we get an incredibly good envelope of surround sound. Like
it's one of the better sounding family rooms. I mean, as an integrator, I have to do a lot of systems like that or similar to that. Unfortunately, we don't do a lot of towers just because people don't want to look at them. We do a lot of sound bars, but your room, that family room, remember when Matt measured it? It's actually killer, and there's no treatments at all in it.
Yeah, we went in and did it. I was surprised. I was expecting, based on the way you had described the construction of the room, because I hadn't really seen it finished. I saw it under construction, and it was a big concrete bunker, but now it's all done. And there was a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of windows, and I was expecting like an RDT or RT60 of, I don't know, 1.5 seconds or something. And I think we got in there. I don't remember what it was. Was it like 0.5 or 0.6?
0.6, yeah.
0.6, yeah, which is on the high end, but like well within what we would consider acceptable. And when you consider that it's a big open space that includes a dining room, kitchen, and the family room all in one, that's actually pretty decent. And you don't hear any kind of excess reverberation or echo. It really, it
sounds. Look, the bottom line is his family and Gene, and I've listened to it several times, love the sound.
Yeah.
My point of all of this is that you don't have to have the perfect environment. There's so much emphasis and so much talk about, well, you got to do this and you got to do that. There's a lot of ways to work around it now. There really is. And as we get these large scale hard monitors or TVs, for lack of a better term, we're going to find a way to accommodate the sound around them. Just like you've worked with RBH on that big theater that we're working on. That's pretty cool. You guys familiar with a company called Artisan?
Yep.
Yeah.
So Artisan for years did a left and right speaker that would attach to the side of a flat panel, and they would have a grill that would be sized to match the TV so that it looked like one unit. And they would actually take a left and a right and make a center channel out of that, then a left and a right for the left speaker and the right speaker. That sounded damn good. But in theory, to any audiophile, that was some kind of sacrilege. But I'm telling you, it sounded amazing.
You know what really caught my eye a couple of years ago? We got invited to see the very first Sony OLED. And you know how it is at trade shows, guys. When they pull you into a dark room that has no, you don't know whose room it is, and they pull us in there, and it hadn't been really released yet, and so there were still a lot of surprises, good surprises, and things to learn about it. So they pull us into this room, and they're showing us the video, and of course we're like, this looks great. The blacks are good, the color's good, yada yada yada. But what was really interesting is the demo clip they were showing us. A boat or something goes across the screen, and it sounded like it went across the screen. And then there was a woman talking in the middle of the screen, and it sounded like she was in the middle of the screen. And we're going, okay, how the heck did you guys do this? Like, what's going on? And that's when we learned that they were using the screen as the speaker. So it just makes me wonder if we might see something similar to that to sort of help and solve some of these problems with the micro LED walls in the future. I don't know.
That's what Sony's doing now with their new
Yeah.
series of TVs, they're supposed to
Yeah.
have some kind of
The
Yeah.
screen is the
technology.
speaker.
Wow.
Yeah.
It uses
The LED is the
it's-
speaker. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that's done is there's a kind of transducer that's mounted to the actual
Behind.
panel itself
Yeah.
behind, and it uses bending wave technology to essentially turn that surface into a speaker. So
Mhm.
the cool benefit is that on a small scale, you can get good enough sound and enough output, and it's fine, and it's compact and it sounds like it's coming from it. The negative would be when you get into the scale of what we're talking about, you just
Oh,
can't
yeah.
get the output, and the
Yeah.
fidelity isn't really there.
True.
So
Yeah,
at
good
the
point.
higher end stuff, we're not really there yet.
Yeah, good
but
point.
Maybe
Yeah,
someday.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
sure.
I'm probably biased as an integrator, but what I want to emphasize to people is don't be afraid to consult an expert
Oh, yeah.
that's experienced, because the internet is full of experts who've had limited experience, and most of their knowledge is based on research on forums from other experts who acquired their information the same way. Talk to some people that have real world experience on how to get you good sound. And if you have to even pay them a consulting fee to do it before you spend your hard-earned money, because there's a lot of solutions and a lot of ways to achieve a phenomenal experience from a sound standpoint, without going from the Dolby charts or the I'm saying there's a lot of ways and a lot of products you may not even know about that help you overcome some of these sound deficiencies.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of problem-solving products out there that people
Mhm.
like Don, like yourself,
Ton.
professionals in the industry need to know about, and that the average consumer may not, because they're not always marketed to consumers. So somebody,
Right.
I mean, I've had people say things to me like, I can't hear well. You know, like I have a friend, he's older than I am, and he's got some hearing issues. He's, I just can't hear well. I don't want like a home theater system. I just want to hear the TV.
Right.
I watch the news. So the TV wasn't good enough. He needed better than that. And he was looking to buy like a whole home theater system. And what I told him was, and I think you guys sell these types of products, is that they actually make these little amplifiers with an HDMI input that you mount on the back of the TV.
Mhm.
It's got a 2 or 3 channel amp, and it's only probably 25, 30 watts. It's not a lot of power, but you hook up you hook up a little sound bar on it, power it with that.
And if
It's
that
great.
suits your needs, that's great. I mean, I'm just saying that
It's a problem solver.
Don't be afraid to call a professional. I know the perception that integrators are expensive and they don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of integrators and cats out there that have a ton of experience that can guide you. And there's companies like Sonance and Origin Acoustics and Martin Logan and the list goes on, Paradigm, Focal, that make. I just did a theater that was a 120-inch motorized Screen Innovations screen that dropped down, Sony 325 4K projector, and I did a 5.2.2 all in ceiling Focal LCR. And I'm telling you, when you sit and listen to it, even though the speakers are in the ceiling, they sound like they're right in front of you coming from the screen.
Well, they were
They
angled,
really-
right?
They're deep and they're angled.
Mhm.
But this was the only viable solution in the real world for this client, because his wife said, "No, you ain't putting any speakers in this room." And we did a pair of jail audio subs in the back. So I'm just saying there's options available.
Yeah.
So if you don't be convinced that one way is the right way and that's the only way.
You know, this gave me an idea of another video topic we could cover, Don, is we could
Mhm.
collect a series of different products that are unique in the industry. Like, for example,
Right.
Triad has some really unique solutions for surround
SVS,
sound.
Triad.
So we should put together
yeah.
a list of maybe 10 or 15 products and just go over it and do a YouTube
So
video.
actually, Speakercraft, I was looking today, which is a company I used to deal with a lot. They have flush mount speakers. Then they have a flush mount module that fires for Atmos. I'm not big on the bouncy house at all, but I know a lot of people don't. That's the only option they have. But they have a flush mount bouncy house speaker. I mean, there's some cool. And Jason, you're the video guru, but you're also a huge audio guy, and you're at every show. Every dealer and vendor. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't say much more than that. I mean, there's so many different things you can do. Limited budgets, limited rooms, limited seating positions. But if you do get some good advice and you do your research, and maybe you have somebody like Don's company come out and help you pick things out, you can get a really decent, probably high performance system if you do everything right. And again, I go back to what I say before. It's the bright enough projector with the right size screen made out of the right material and the right room treatments. And if you do those things, one of the things I love to do for people is I like to help them build a high performance budget system. So that might be a $3,000 projector, 100-inch screen, not going too crazy on the actual product you're buying, but just doing the room as best as you can. And that's really the most important thing. You don't have to go spend tons and tons and tons of money on the gear if the room sucks. Don't do it. It's worthless. It's pointless.
It's the social media experts. It's like, oh, I'll get a divorce lawyer. Whatever, dude. Go do your own theater. Have fun with that. So, but people with money, the people that want good shit, they call me or somebody like me because they don't want to jack around. You know what I mean? And you do whatever you want. I'm just telling you, you've heard 8 systems. I've heard 8,000 systems.
Yeah.
I've had the same speaker in 8,000 different rooms. Yeah. I mean, whatever, dude.
A guy called me down. He was a DIY guy. He did his own theater down in South Florida.
Paint the screen.
He was the head of some doctor group, optometrist group or something like that. So the guy, just had gobs of money and he was an enthusiast and decided to do his theater room himself. More power to you, right? So he had a really nice projector. He had a reasonably sized screen, not too big, not too small. He actually did a really good job positioning the speakers, and his audio system was nice.
A lot of people do.
There was one major drawback that kind of ruined all of it for me. The walls were yellow. Oh. The walls were yellow and the carpet was red.
Yeah, or the HVAC's loud when it kicks on, or the platform's not. Yeah.
Was it McDonald's themed?
Yeah, right. I mean, it was. I kind of politely asked him, like, how'd this happen, And he was like, well, for me to do the theater room, I wasn't able to pick the cosmetics. And I was like, okay, but
welcome to my world.
That system was DIY and would have been sweet if he had just done a little bit differently with the cosmetics. But that's what I'm talking about.
There's a ton of people that are doing, do it yourself, that are doing amazing. Like, I'm like, wow, I'm impressed, and that's badass.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's always one or two little things that they didn't get right because they just, how many forums can you peruse? You know what I'm saying?
Well, if you get 10 things right and one major thing wrong, it's a total system failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when you're watching The Quiet Place and your air conditioner goes, right, Gene? You know what I mean? Like, or you're sweating your ass off, or your platform's not high enough, or, I mean, there's a million moving parts and pieces. And people that are trying, I feel bad for people that are trying to get into this and they go on one of these groups and they're getting a million different opinions. Because listen, people buy on the opinions of others, and they buy on impulse, and they fiercely defend their decision. Clips people, but they fiercely defend their decision no matter what. I mean, period. They don't want to hear anything else because nobody wants to admit that they made a wrong decision.
So the first dedicated theater I did myself, and I didn't have the experience to do rooms like this. I put a platform in, I made it too high. I was trying to get the sight lines right. And basically they would have been right, but it was too high for having no, it's 12 inches, had no stairs. Yeah. So I had a 12-inch step.
It's good exercise, jump up and down there.
On top of that, the distance between the edge of it and the wall, after everything was positioned right so that the seats were good. I should have probably just had the platform go all the way to the wall, but I didn't. I actually made like a walking path down the side of it, but it was 20 inches wide.
Oh,
so you were like this trying to walk through the thing. Couldn't get equipment in. That was awful.
So is that why you sold that old house?
Yeah, it was a trip hazard.
Well, guys, I think I think
so much good stuff. Yeah, sorry.
I think we're at over the hour mark.
Oh wow, yeah.
Jason, are you going to be at CEDIA?
Yes,
he's going to do it. He's going to work with us, dude.
Yep, we're doing the ISF program right now has evolved because of lockdowns and COVIDs and these types of things, but we've come up with something that we think is kind of genius. And honestly, I don't know why we didn't do this before, but if anybody's been through the class before, it's 3 days. First day is theory with some hands-on. Second day is a little more theory with some hands-on. And the third day is pretty much mostly hands-on. For an integrator, for somebody to come out to commit, 4 to 5 days, get there a day early and whatnot, it's a lot. So we're like, how can we trim down the amount of hours somebody has to sit there and listen to us talk. We said, okay, let's see if we can do something online. So what we've done right now, partnering with Cedia, is if you wanted to learn like the fundamentals of what we do and kind of what the rules are and how to follow them and how to make some simple adjustments to your system that will make a big difference. That's the kind of stuff that's all covered in level 1, like how your eyes work and whatnot. So the level 1 course is actually online right now. Anybody could go take it right now. It's 11 modules, work at your own pace. And then once you take that level 1, if you want to continue on, you can go do the 2-day course after that. So we're going to be doing the 2-day course Monday and Tuesday, and then we'll be at the show for the rest of the week. I'll be working the Meridio booth, and I'm hanging out with you guys I know a little bit, and I'm hanging out with Phil Jones also for a little bit too. So it'll be a fun show.
Nice.
We're going to be broadcasting from the Sound United booth.
Yep.
And then I'm going to be going around, and probably Gene some too. It's at different manufacturers. I'm probably going to hit up Tom to come to AV Pro Edge.
Yeah.
But I just want to. So my mission, being involved with Audioholics, and Gene's like my best friend, and we hang out, we work out, and all that. I mean, he stalks me. I don't know. It's weird. But so basically, we're trying to bring new products to the general, the integration, like a Sonance or a Origin Acoustics or the products they make that are solutions, because for people who live in the really real world, whose wives are like, you ain't putting that shit in my room. You know what I mean? Products to do that. Even Matt, even in your room, right? In your new house, right? Your theater room's your man cave, but everything else has got to be hidden and can't be seen.
Yeah, Don's alluding to the fact that my wife is not a big fan of this kind of stuff, so I have my own space. I can do whatever I want in there. But Don's been having to deal with me, be like, "No, Don, we're not doing that. My wife won't let me." And he's like, "Oh, come on, we're good." No, it's not. We're not doing that.
I take that for.
But she makes good money, man. She's kicking ass.
I love my wife. That's not the issue.
I take that for granted. My girlfriend does not care. You know, when we first met, she was listening to the earbuds that came with her cell phone. You know, so. You know, she's watching movies like she never has before, so she really doesn't care. I take that for granted sometimes. So my new girlfriend, I basically said, "Look, we can move in together. Here's the deal: I get to play my stereo and surround sound as loud as I want, whenever I want." There was other things too, but I can't talk about those. They're inappropriate. But anyways, that's the main thing, that because you know what? If I can't turn my subwoofers on, I can't live, because I'm a bassaholic. Yeah, there's what I mean? Like that's the bottom line. Everybody out here has to understand one thing. Jason and Matt and Gene, besides me and my dear friends, and I love them, we're all audio video nerds. I mean, we live for this shit. We love it. We crank it. We live. How many times we exchange playlists and music? I'm like, lots. 2 a.m, check this shit out. You know what I mean? Like that's we are as much into it as you are. It's just that we pay our bills doing it. Versus you guys probably have normal jobs. Don't quit your normal jobs. Let me tell you. Don't. But we're on the cutting edge. I know that Matt and Gene and I are working on some stuff right now. Like with I'm not knocking projectors. Listen, projectors rock. I've been installing projectors since the mid-90s. There's no better way for non-peasants like us to have a big screen picture than a projector. Yeah. And dude, you can get an Epson or you can get $3-4 grand and you could get a badass monster screen that you couldn't have had 10 years ago for just a little bit of money. But what I'm saying to you is that now you can buy an 85-inch LED TV for about $1,500. These micro LEDs are going to come down like that eventually. Eventually, you're going to be able to go in your living room and have a 200-inch screen or a 180-inch screen with filament speakers. I mean, that's the future. So you either evolve or die. You know, it's just like listening to music. I love 2 channels still, but listening to Apple Music on Atmos in Gene's house, like, gives you goosebumps. It's a superior way to listen if it's recorded properly. And you can kiss my ass if you don't follow it. Come listen to it. I just started tinkering with that because Tidal has some of that stuff now. Man, Tidal's doing it too. I'm not an Apple guy, so I don't do it. Not as good. But I was ready to hate it, and I kind of wanted to hate it. I think that's just my biases, but I was listening to a few songs and I was like,
Dude,
holy crap,
it's
this is
recorded right,
cool.
Yeah.
that shit
Done
gives
right,
you
it definitely is a big
Yeah.
improvement.
because I'm a 2-channel. I was teed on high-end 2-channel,
Sure.
and I still listen to high-end 2-channel. But man, when there's a good song
It's
recorded,
cool, man.
Gene showed me, he convinced me that's recorded well in Atmos.
Yeah.
It's a visceral experience, man. It's stunning.
It's so different. Yeah. It's really cool.
So Gene, I
Yeah.
think this has turned into a marathon. We're just going to keep
Yeah.
going
All right.
for the next 12
All right.
hours.
We gotta-
It's hard to
That's the
stop.
trouble.
It's hard.
Coming
That's
in.
the trouble. That's why he's getting on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, if I could just maybe plug one more thing real quick. Right after we get back from CEDIA is the Audioelectronics TV shootout. So keep your eyes open for that. That's always a huge event. We're doing 2 days. Day one's going to be 4K TVs in the morning, 8K TVs in the afternoon, and then the day after is going to be projectors. So stand by.
Local? This is in Tampa?
No, this is in New York City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Value Electronics is up there in New York, so that's usually where the shootout is. So yeah, stay tuned for that. You guys will start to see, like, for this past model year at least, like who's really doing some good work. So that'll be fun. Keep your eyes peeled for that.
So 2 things before we go, I want to announce to everybody that's following along. Number one is that Matt Pose and I are going to start doing a weekly live stream ourselves, bringing in all kinds of manufacturers, integrators, just a multitude of subjects relating to what we do and having some really good information. What do you think, Matt? We're going to do that like a Tuesday night?
We haven't discussed it, but we
Put
can
you on the spot. one night during the week.
So basically, the way this is going to work is Don and I are going to get on. At the beginning of the show, Don's going to be sober. By the end of the show, Don's going to be totally trashed. And we're going to see the difference throughout the progression.
Grumpy old Don.
I'm not grumpy, man. Look, Uncle Don keeps it real, dude. I'm just saying. But we're going to do that. And also, we're working on bringing video reviews to Audioholics because we want to apply the same standards that we've done for measurements on audio to video with some interesting real world twist to it. So that's something that's going to be exciting. Listen, because the vast majority of people love video more than audio. I mean, the standard, because people will buy a $4,000 TV, then they'll buy like a Sonos soundbar or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
I see it all the time.
Right. So we're gonna review these TVs and go, wouldn't this go really nice with the Focal surround system?
Yeah, right.
Or an RBH surround system.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna give a little bit different spin on it. And we're trying to bring more real world, keeping it real information to everybody that follows Audioholics, period.
Yeah.
And the TV might blend well with the Sonos soundbar. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
or the Bose, right? Right. I think the biggest video Audioholics has ever done was the one we did, Gene, with why do audiophiles hate Bose? Or it's close to it, right?
That got a lot of
like
that was very polarizing.
We should do a part 2 and see what happens.
Yeah,
right.
We should do. Yeah.
For
I just
sure.
don't want to get sued by the evil empire. You know what I mean?
No, they like us, man. They sent me headphones. They sent me
No,
a
they're
video bar.
Bose. Actually, Bose is a great company, dude. I joke with them. Listen, I don't know how much surround sound is part of their. It's a lot of lifestyle products, but their headphones, their commercial stuff, they do make great products. I mean, we all know that. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
All the pilots wear Bose headphones, don't they? Like airline pilots?
Yeah.
That's a they do.
Although those B&W headphones that we have a pair of, Gene, are pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter has those now. She stole them from me.
Did she steal them from you?
Yeah.
Listen, there's so many good products right now that it's hard to decide what to get if you're trying to spend your money. It really is. Like from DefTech to Polk to Paradigm to Focal to, I mean, there's a lot of you're splitting hairs.
People come to me and they say, "Hey, I want to buy a nice TV. I've got a $2,000 budget," and I go, "Sweet, you can get almost anything."
Right, your limit,
yeah, you can get almost anything for $2,000.
Yeah, Gene and I both have the 900 series Sony 85.
Awesome.
Our family room.
They're like
kicks ass.
$1,500 now.
It's
Yeah.
sweet
I was
TV.
watching with my girl the other night. She's like, we're watching the Aerial America Hawaii. She's like, that's stunning.
It's sweet.
You know,
and it's not
always
calibrated.
good when you get. It's always good when you get your girl to go, that sounds amazing, or that looks amazing. You're like, my job here is done.
She'll really like it when it's calibrated.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I've been inviting you for dinner.
I know
Told
a
you
guy.
I can pick your ass up. Yeah,
I know a guy.
I'm Matthew Pose. I'm trying to get him up here.
Well, Jason, the next time we have you on
I'll get
camera, well, it'll be Cedia, but
Cedia.
hopefully the time
Yeah.
after that, you'll be here doing some calibrations.
Yeah,
on
it'll be
displays.
fun. It'll be cool. And I know you guys have been working on this for a really long time, and I've just kind of been
Yeah.
on standby, just waiting to get the word. So
yeah.
Right.
So everybody should know, dude. Listen, Jason Dustal is a video pimp.
no, don't.
Like,
You're gonna make me blush.
Dude,
Stop.
no, you are. Like, he travels the world teaching people how to be video pimps.
Yeah, it's. I
You know
mean,
what I mean?
it's a good time. But
It is
listen,
what it is.
I in the near dear of my heart, I'm an audio guy. I mean, you know.
Right. Was
But-
that a dildo?
No, it's a vacuum tube, you jerk.
Oh, okay. It's like a butt plug. I don't know, dude. Whatever your kink is.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
but you know,
we got Pose to laugh. So Pose, listen.
Well, who would
I'm an
tattoo
asshole
a
of the
butt
channel.
plug on their arm?
You never know.
someone that Don
Like,
knows.
look at that. So Pose is like, he's like the audio version of Jason. Maybe not as
Yeah.
cool, but you know, he's a
Yeah, I
savant.
don't have any tattoos of butt plugs on my arm.
Yeah, right.
Oh, it's a
With
tube.
that, with
My
that
bad,
said,
my
I
bad.
think we've
I'm embarrassed.
I think we've run out of gas on this on the stream. I think
Shit,
it's
I got
time to
way
wrap
more
it
gas.
up.
Come on.
Don's getting
I'm
slapped
sure
at
you
me.
do.
All right,
So,
love you.
So Jason,
Love everybody watching, man. Listen, you guys comment and stuff, except that swirling dragon mist guy. Fuck that guy. But everybody else,
oh, he's one of our
I'm
biggest
kidding.
fans.
I know I love that guy. I'm just kidding. But listen, it's intimate. Like, this is cool that people can tune in and we can. These guys are heavy hitters. I'm a chump. All I do is sell TVs. You know,
Yeah.
Gene's the audio godfather. So I'm just flexing, trying to make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Guys, it's always fun. Anytime you want to have me on, you know, just give me a little bit of heads up, and I'm happy to
Yeah,
come
yeah.
hang out. And if your viewers and listeners want to get a little more deep into some video stuff, you know, we could certainly put together a few things and some presentations and show some really nerdy stuff like charts and graphs, and just
Right.
like you guys do with audio, we got the same stuff going on in
Yeah, we
video.
want to definitely do that for sure.
Yeah,
I would
it'd be fun.
love to have. So anytime you calibrate a TV, if you want to show the before and afters, you could send me the information. I could post it
Oh,
on our
yeah.
website.
Absolutely.
Let's do that. You got time before CD, or should we do it after CD? Jason, come to Gene's house.
I have no time before
All right,
Cedia.
all right.
In fact, we do Cedia, and then the shootouts a couple days later, and then I'm up at Columbus.
You know what?
A few days
It's
off
better
after that.
It's
So,
better after
I'm
because
slammed.
I'm integrating a receiver in my master bedroom in the coming weeks, so then we could calibrate all the displays. in the
Oh
house.
yeah, do it all at once. Yeah, one shot. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier.
Yeah. All
Awesome,
right, guys.
guys.
Well,
Thank
this
you.
is a wrap. Jason, thanks for coming on. Matt, Don, it was awesome. Guys, if you want to see this PowerPoint presentation that Matt put together, it'll be on our Patreon channel. So you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate our patrons. We appreciate your support to allow us to continue to produce this content. And next week, we'll be back on another live stream. Actually, Matt, you don't know this, but we're going to do a live stream this Sunday night on the most accurate subwoofer we've ever tested.
Mm.
I do know, actually.
Who could that be?
A certain individual messaged me and said, "Do I want to join?" And I said, "I think I'm going to be at Gene's anyway."
That's true.
Are you coming this weekend?
Yes, we have. Oh, yeah. Oh,
We have a
wait,
crazy
wait,
test.
I
Can
didn't
we
even-
announce
I
it,
didn't-
man?
dude, I didn't even announce this.
Can we
have a
announce
special, We have a special guest. Jeff. What's Jeff's last name? Pemberin or
Parmenian? I don't.
Permini? Something
I'm
like
not
that.
gonna
Anyway,
pronounce
we
it.
got the
Never said it
owner.
out loud before.
We got the owner of JTR, the guy that makes 140
40-day bays.
coming to my place to bring his new speaker. It's RJT. It's a giant tower. It's got 18-inch woofers. It's got a big horn, 4 8-inch drivers for the mids. We're going to be doing a video unboxing of
Can't
this.
wait to hear it.
We're going to be doing measurements
that
of it.
shit
Matt's going to be checking that out, and we're going to be doing a review. Thank you, Permanian. I'm sorry I butchered his name.
No, look, JTR is the bell of the ball right now, and we're excited to have him in and get to crank it because I want to experience 140 dBs.
Hey,
That's a lot.
Jeff's been a friend
Hey,
of mine
you
for
want-
a
Jay,
lot of years.
Jay, you
and
wanna
he
come?
really makes
I'll come
good
pick you
speakers,
up.
so.
I'll give you some earplugs. No, it's going to be great. I'm excited because I know there's a lot of people that I respect and a few I don't respect, but a lot of people I respect that absolutely adore JTR speakers. So I'm excited to hear them.
Well, and these are not JTR speakers. These are actually RTJ speakers, which is the new.
What?
Basically,
Yes.
it's the name reverse, but
You
it's
kidding?
a new line. No, I'm not dead serious.
he's
It's a new
right.
line of speakers, and it's actually like an integrator line, so it's different from the other stuff. It's higher end, and it uses a brand new waveguide. And so, where the other ones could do maybe like 135, maybe up to 140 decibels, these are probably going to do a good 6 decibels more.
Oh my goodness.
We want to make sure you're totally deaf.
Well, I was going to bring one of my ARs and just shoot it in Gene's room and measure it to see what was louder.
Probably the speakers. We're going to have 2 of them set up in there. No, I think it's going to be really cool. When he showed me what he was putting together, I was just like, well, that's over the top. Although, to be honest, I thought it was crazy, and now I'm designing something equally crazy.
But JTR is all about over the top. That's what I dig about them. Like it's a cool company, man, and everybody raves about the customer service. And I mean, you can't knock them at all. I mean, the guy's built a killer brand in a short amount of time, and I respect the hell out of that.
He's also very talented, and his subwoofers, I think, actually are some of the best on the market from a performance standpoint.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would love to have
guys,
a couple 18s.
we've got a lot of stuff coming up in Audioholics. It's a wonderful time to be a viewer of our channel or a supporter of the site, because we're just cooking content and we're working with so many subject matter experts. And I feel really privileged to have guys like Jason, Matt, Don, Anthony Gramani. We have
let's not Anthony Gramani. I always say that.
He's like, I want to be like that when I grow up. Kind of
Dude,
guy.
Anthony Gramani is, besides just being an incredibly cool, nice guy,
he's hilarious too.
He's funny as shit. I mean, his taste in booze isn't bad either. You know what I mean? And his taste in chocolate for Gene. Yeah. No, but we really do, and we're all like a big family. I mean, we all have the same goal of trying to get really solid information out to people because we love it as much as they do. I mean,
better sound through research.
Did you just say that? Really? You're gonna get sued for saying that shit, right? You know that, right? Allegedly.
All right, guys. Well,
thank you, guys.
We're wrapping this up. Don, say goodbye. Give your little Vulcan salute. I hear babies crying.
I'm going to have to go get my baby. She woke up.
Oh shit! I heard it.
All right, guys. Well, until next time, my friends.
Keep watching.